What if the one person you trusted most to love you unconditionally suddenly declares you no longer his son because of who you love? What happens when the family home you grew up in becomes a place of rejection and silence? And in the moment when everything is slipping away, could the voice from your past be the one to save you? Evan stared out the window of his small Brooklyn apartment, the city lights of New York flickering like distant promises he wasn't sure he could keep. At 28, he had carved out a life that felt real, a graphic design job at a mid-sized firm, friends who never questioned his choices, and most importantly, Micah. Micah, with his easy laugh and steady hands, had walked into Evan's world 2 years earlier at a crowded coffee shop on Fifth Avenue. A spilled latte, a quick apology, and hours of conversation later, they were inseparable. Micah taught middle school history and believed in second chances the way some people believed in religion. Evan loved that about him. But tonight the weight of truth pressed against his ribs like a stone. His mother had died when he was 17, leaving only his father Robert, a retired mechanic living in a quiet New Jersey suburb. Robert still kept the old family photos on the mantle, the ones where Evan wore Little League uniforms and smiled like the world was simple. Evan had hidden who he was for years, dating girls in high school, pretending at college parties. Now he couldn't anymore. Micah had said it gently over breakfast, "You deserve to be seen, Evan. All of you." The drive across the bridge felt endless. When Evan pulled up to the familiar brick house, Robert opened the door with the same gruff hug he always gave. They sat in the living room, the television murmuring about baseball. Evan's hands shook as he spoke. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you. I'm gay, and I have a boyfriend. His name is Micah. He makes me happier than I've ever been." The silence stretched like a fault line. Robert's face changed from confusion to something colder, his jaw tightening. "You what?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. Evan tried to explain the years of hiding, the relief of finally being honest, how Micah wasn't a phase. Robert stood up, pointing toward the door. "Get out of my house. I didn't raise a son to live like that. You're dead to me now. Don't call, don't visit. We're done." Evan left, numb, the words ringing in his ears like a slammed door. Back in Brooklyn, Micah waited on the couch, arms open. Evan collapsed into them, sobbing for the father he had just lost. "It's okay, baby," Micah whispered, stroking his hair. "We have each other. We'll build something new." But Evan felt hollow. That night, he lay awake replaying childhood memories, fishing trips with Robert, the proud look on his dad's face at graduation. All of it gone in one conversation. The next weeks blurred. Evan threw himself into work, designing logos for local nonprofits, trying to outrun the ache. Friends rallied around him. His best friend Lena, a fellow designer, brought over Thai food and listened without judgment. "Your dad's loss," she said. "Not yours." Micah cooked dinners, planned weekend hikes in the Catskills, anything to remind Evan he was loved. Yet every unanswered call to his father's number, every holiday, without an invitation, carved deeper grooves in Evan's heart. He wondered if he would ever feel whole again. One rainy evening, Micah found Evan staring at an old photo of his parents. "You don't have to forget him," Micah said softly. "But you can't let his rejection define you." Evan nodded, but inside the question burned. What kind of man was he if even his own father couldn't love him? The disownment wasn't just words, it was a rewrite of his entire story. And as winter settled over New York, Evan realized the real journey was only beginning. Spring arrived in Brooklyn with cherry blossoms and longer days, but Evan's grief lingered like a shadow. He and Micah had moved in together, officially sharing the apartment that now felt like home. Micah's books lined the shelves, his lesson plans scattered on the kitchen table. Their mornings were quiet rituals, coffee, shared glances, and soft kisses before the day pulled them apart. Evan loved these moments, yet the emptiness from his father's silence gnawed at him during quiet hours. At work, things grew complicated. A new client, a conservative marketing firm, pulled Evan aside after a presentation. "We love your designs," the man said, "but we heard rumors about your lifestyle. Just keep it professional, okay?" Evan smiled tightly, nodding, but inside he burned. He had never hidden Micah from colleagues, yet now every meeting felt like walking a tightrope. That night, he told Micah over pasta, "It's like they're waiting for me to slip up." Micah squeezed his hand. "You're talented. They'll see that, or they'll lose you." Their relationship deepened through small trials. One weekend, they drove to Fire Island for a quiet getaway, walking the beach hand in hand. Micah talked about his own coming out years earlier. His parents had struggled, but eventually embraced him. It took time, he said. Some people need space to grow. Evan wanted to believe that, but Robert's number stayed blocked in his phone. Friends became family. Lena introduced them to her circle, a tight group of queer creatives and allies. At a rooftop party in Williamsburg, Evan laughed for the first time in months, watching Micah dance awkwardly to old disco tracks. Later, under string lights, Micah pulled him close, whispering, "I'm proud of you for still showing up every day." Evan felt seen in a way his father never allowed. Yet doubts crept in during sleepless nights. Was he selfish for choosing love over blood? Had he destroyed the only family he knew? Summer brought a work trip to Chicago. Evan presented alone, and on the flight home, turbulence rattled him, reminding him how fragile everything felt. When he landed, Micah waited at the gate with flowers. They spent the evening on their tiny balcony talking about future dreams, adopting a dog, maybe buying a house upstate. "I want a life where you never have to hide again," Micah said. Evan kissed him, grateful, but the ache remained. By autumn, Evan had started therapy, a quiet office in Manhattan, where he unpacked years of shame. The therapist listened as Evan described Robert's face that night. "Rejection from a parent hits the core," she said. "But you're rewriting your worth now." Slowly, Evan began volunteering at an LGBTQ youth center, teaching design skills to teens who reminded him of his younger self. Micah joined, sometimes sharing history lessons that made the kids laugh. Their bond grew stronger, forged in shared purpose. Still, Evan checked his father's social media once a month just to know Robert was okay. No updates. No olive branch. The silence stretched into another season, and Evan wondered if love could ever bridge the gap he had created. Yet with Micah beside him, he kept moving forward, one breath, one day at a time. The city kept spinning, and so did his heart, learning to beat without the approval he once craved. Winter in New York brought snow that blanketed the streets, turning Brooklyn into a postcard. Evan and Micah hosted their first holiday dinner, inviting Lena and a few close friends. The apartment smelled of roasted turkey and Micah's famous apple pie. Laughter filled the rooms, but Evan felt the empty chair where his father should have been. He hid it while smiling for photos, yet inside the holiday cheer felt hollow. At the youth center, Evan mentored a shy 17-year-old named Alex who was struggling with his own identity. "My dad says it's a phase," Alex confided one afternoon. Evan's throat tightened. "I used to hear that too," he replied. "But it's not. You're enough exactly as you are." Helping Alex gave Evan purpose, a way to turn his pain into something useful. Micah noticed the change. "You're healing them and yourself," he said one night as they lay in bed listening to the radiator hiss. Their relationship faced its first real test when Micah's sister visited from Boston. She adored Evan, but her questions about future plans, marriage, kids, stirred old fears in Evan. "What if I can never give you the normal life your family wants?" he asked Micah after she left. Micah cupped his face. "Normal is us, Evan. The rest is noise." Still, the conversation lingered like frost on the window. Society's prejudice appeared in unexpected places. At a neighborhood block party, a neighbor made a casual joke about those people, and Evan walked away, fists clenched. Micah followed, offering quiet support. "We don't have to explain ourselves to everyone," he reminded Evan. Those moments taught Evan resilience, the kind that came from choosing peace over confrontation. Spring brought Pride season. Evan and Micah marched in the New York Pride Parade, holding hands under rainbow flags. The energy was electric, strangers cheering, waving signs of love. For the first time, Evan felt part of something bigger than his grief. That night, they danced at a street festival, Micah's arm around his waist. "This is our community," Micah said. Evan smiled, realizing he had built one despite everything. Yet the internal crisis deepened. Therapy sessions uncovered layers Evan hadn't named, the fear that loving Micah had cost him his father forever. One session, he cried, remembering Robert teaching him to change a tire, the pride in his voice. "What if I was wrong to tell him?" Evan asked the therapist. She answered gently, "You were honest. The rest is his work." Friendships anchored him. Lena organized a weekend cabin trip upstate, where the group roasted marshmallows and shared stories. Evan opened up about the disownment for the first time in months. "It still hurts," he admitted. "But I'm learning I don't need his permission to be happy." Micah listened, eyes full of quiet pride. Back in the city, life settled into a rhythm. Work the center, dates with Micah. Evan started sketching again, not for clients, but for himself drawings of two men walking into a future no one could take away. The seasons turned, and Evan felt himself growing stronger roots spreading even in rocky soil. The man he was becoming didn't erase the boy who once sought his father's approval, but he no longer needed it to stand tall. With Micah's love and the community around him, Evan stepped into a version of himself that felt true. Summer heat wrapped New York like a blanket. Evan and Micah planned a road trip to the coast, renting a small cabin in Montauk. The days were filled with ocean swims, long talks, and evenings watching sunsets. Their love felt solid, yet Evan sensed an undercurrent of tension. Micah had been hinting at engagement rings, talking about making things official. Evan wanted it too, but the shadow of his father's rejection made commitment feel risky. "What if I'm still broken?" he confessed one night on the beach. Micah held him. "You're not broken. You're healing." Back home, work intensified. Evan landed a big project redesigning a campaign for a national nonprofit focused on LGBTQ rights. The late nights tested their patience. One evening after a missed dinner, Micah snapped, "I feel like I'm competing with your past." The argument escalated, words flying about family expectations and unspoken fears. Evan stormed out, driving aimlessly through the city, his mind racing. He pulled over near the Brooklyn Bridge, tears blurring the lights. The next morning, Micah apologized first. They talked for hours, unpacking the ways Robert's silence still shaped Evan's fears. "I choose you every day," Micah said. "But I need you to choose us too." Evan promised to try. They renewed their commitment, planning a small gathering with friends to celebrate their anniversary. At the youth center, Alex graduated high school, and Evan attended the ceremony, proud as any parent. The moment reminded him how far he had come. Later, Alex hugged him, whispering, "You showed me it's possible." Evan's heart swelled. Micah joined the celebration, bringing flowers. Their shared purpose strengthened the bond. Fall brought cooler air and new challenges. Evan's firm faced layoffs, and he worried about stability. Micah supported him, applying for new teaching opportunities. Through it all, they leaned on each other. One weekend, they visited Micah's family in Boston, where acceptance felt easy. Evan envied the warmth, yet it gave him hope. The internal storm peaked during a quiet evening. Evan found an old voicemail from Robert from years ago before the disownment. Hearing his father's voice cracked something open. He cried in Micah's arms, admitting the anger he had buried. "I hate that he still has power over me," Evan said. Micah listened, then suggested writing a letter Evan would never send. The exercise helped. Evan poured out years of hurt and slowly felt lighter. Their love matured through these tests. Micah proposed quietly one autumn evening on their balcony with a simple ring and words that felt like home. Evan said yes, tears of joy mixing with the last traces of old pain. The wedding would be small, but meaningful, friends as family. As winter approached, Evan realized he had chosen growth over grief. The man who once crumbled under rejection now stood ready for whatever came next. The accident happened on a rainy November night. Evan and Micah had argued again about the wedding guest list, Evan still hoping against reason that his father might come. Words grew sharp. Evan grabbed his keys, needing air. "I'll be back," he muttered, driving into the storm. The roads were slick, headlights blurring. His mind raced with old doubts. A truck swerved. Metal screamed. Darkness swallowed everything. Evan woke in a hospital bed, machines beeping, pain radiating through his body. Fractured ribs, a concussion, and a broken leg. Micah sat beside him, eyes red from crying. "You scared me," he whispered, gripping Evan's hand. The doctors explained the crash could have been worse. Evan's emergency contact was Micah, but hospital records still listed Robert as next of kin from years ago. Days blurred in the sterile room. Friends visited Lena, bringing flowers, the youth center kids sending cards. Micah never left, staying through nights, reading to Evan from his favorite books. Their love felt unbreakable, now forged in fear. Evan apologized for the fight. "I'm done letting the past drive," he promised. Micah smiled. "We heal together." Then the phone rang. Evan's cell lit up with a number he hadn't seen in years. "Robert." Micah stepped out, giving privacy. Evan answered, voice hoarse. "Dad." The line was silent at first, then Robert spoke, voice thick with emotion. "I saw the news online about the crash. They listed your name. I had to call. Are you okay, son?" The word son hit Evan like a wave. Tears came unbidden. Robert continued, "I've been a fool. Your mother would hate what I did. I've missed you every day. They talked for 20 minutes, awkward, halting, but real. Robert was driving down from New Jersey tomorrow. When Evan hung up, Micah returned, sensing the shift. He called first, Evan whispered, stunned. Recovery began with physical therapy and long conversations. Robert arrived the next morning, flowers in hand, eyes filled with regret. He sat by the bed, apologizing for years of silence, explaining his own fears, prejudice passed down from his generation. Evan listened, heart cracking open. I was wrong, Robert said. I want to know Micah. I want my son back. Micah joined them later, the three men navigating careful words. The hospital room felt smaller, less lonely. Evan's body healed slowly, but his spirit mended faster. The accident had forced a reckoning. As discharge day approached, Evan realized the call he feared most had become the one that saved him. Spring returned to New York with soft green leaves and fresh beginnings. Evan walked with a slight limp, but stronger than before. The wedding took place in a small Brooklyn garden. Friends and family gathered under string lights. Robert stood in the front row beside Micah's parents, tears in his eyes, as Evan and Micah exchanged vows. I promise to choose us every day, Evan said, voice steady. Micah kissed him, a cheers. Life after the accident settled into a new rhythm. Evan returned to work part-time, the nonprofit campaign winning awards. He and Micah bought a house upstate with room for a dog and maybe kids someday through adoption. Robert visited often, repairing fences literally and emotionally, helping with renovations, sharing stories of Evan's childhood. The healing wasn't instant, but it was steady. Evan continued mentoring at the youth center now, with Robert occasionally joining to talk about acceptance. Alex graduated college and credited Evan with changing his path. Micah's teaching career thrived, and together they built the family they had chosen. Evan often reflected on the journey, the disownment, the years of silence, the crash that cracked everything open. He no longer carried the weight of his father's rejection as a chain, but as a chapter that taught him resilience. With Micah's hand in his and Robert's quiet presence at family dinners, Evan understood that love wasn't perfect, it was persistent. The city hummed around them, full of possibility. Evan sketched new designs late at night, dreaming of futures where no one had to hide. The man who once questioned his worth now stood tall, knowing he was loved exactly as he was. The accident hadn't just broken bones, it had rebuilt a family in ways no one expected. And in the quiet moments, Evan whispered thanks to the universe for the call that changed everything. In the end, this story taught me that family isn't defined by blood alone, but by the courage to reach across pain and choose forgiveness. Evan's journey shows that identity crises and societal prejudice can wound deeply, yet love, patience, and honest conversations create paths to healing. The lesson is simple yet hard. Never underestimate the power of a single call or the strength it takes to answer. Hold your truth gently but firmly, and remember that even the hardest hearts can soften when given time and grace. Live openly, love bravely, and let second chances rewrite what was lost. In crafting this tale, I realized family ties strained by prejudice can mend through vulnerability and time. The lesson? Love demands courage, not just in coming out, but in forgiving those who hurt us most. Never underestimate a father's silent love or the quiet power of choosing connection over resentment.